So I'm here today with Iona Bain. Iona, are you well? Everything good?
Yeah, all good. I'm busy, which is not surprising given what's going on at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly in demand at the moment, which is good.
So let's crack on. Tell me, kind of, you are the go-to voice for the millennial money in the UK. How does that make you feel? And kind of, how do you bear the responsibility, I suppose?
Well, it's certainly not something I ever thought I would be when I was growing up. I don't come from a financial or economics background. I trained as a musician and got to a very high standard and thought really up until the age of about 22 or 23 that that's what I would spend the rest of my life doing. But then I left university, got out into the big bad world and realized that actually I knew nothing about money. And this was around the time of the 2008 recession, when jobs were thin on the ground. It was extremely competitive. The country was falling in and out of recession. The housing market was becoming extremely dysfunctional. And it was becoming harder and harder for young people to achieve financial independence. And yet there was this gap within the media in terms of coverage around those issues that came from a young perspective. And I thought that actually, as someone who really needed to learn about money myself, but also recognized that I was far from alone, that I could maybe step into that void and start talking about money in a funny, frank, and hopefully fascinating way. And so that's why I started Young Money blog in 2011. And really, the rest is history.
And how was it you finding out about it? Like the more you found out about it, did it become clearer? Or is it still...
it became it became clearer and more complicated, Nick, at the
Okay.
same time, if that makes sense. So on the one hand, I realized that the deeper that I dug into this subject,
Hmm.
the more layers I uncovered, and actually that, money is not just about numbers, it's not just about understanding products, although those things are very important. It's also about understanding the psychology of money, the fact that we form our attitudes to money by the age of 8, the fact that we can have very deep-seated psychological tendencies that can actually work against good money habits.
Hmm.
Uncovering all of that was really fascinating and gave me a deeper understanding of money and made me realize that it's a lot harder than just say, do X, Y, and Z and you can save money. But on the other hand, learning more about money also helped me feel a lot more empowered. And that's why the motto of my blog has always been, don't get mad, get informed. Because there's an awful lot to get mad about,
Yeah.
but that's not going to get you very far. Getting informed is really the first step towards you then coming up with positive, constructive solutions.
So can I ask you, it's something that I've always, when I've talked about you, it's something at the back of my mind, I've talked to clients about you, etc. Obviously, for you, you're for the millennial generation, the younger generation, talk about money, but actually, and so the question is, well, how informed are they? But then always back in my mind is like, actually, how informed do you think we are as a nation about money? Kind of, do we actually kind of, are certain generations better than other generations, or is it just a problem we have in society that we don't really understand our money?
Well, I think that the millennial generation was the first generation to really suffer from not having had financial education, formal financial education. And what I mean by that is that the older generations didn't really get financial education unless it was at home. But to be honest, especially if you belong to the baby boomer generation, then unless you made some very poor decisions, you got away with it. And
Right.
that's because of overall kind of macroeconomic trends like the rise in house prices and so on. But if you're a millennial and you left school without any financial education and you grew up in a house that didn't really talk about money and you kind of had to just get to grips with the subject yourself, then you were part of the first generation that was really thrown into this incredibly complex consumer landscape
Hmm.
that was filled with these very tricksy financial products with lots of strings attached, and whole kind of areas like debt, which are extremely easy to get into and extremely difficult to get out of. And actually, one of the things that millennials have had to learn is how do we get to grips with this stuff and learn about it the easy way rather than the hard way? Because there's plenty of potential for you to fall into traps throughout your 20s and 30s and find it really hard to get back out of. Whereas I guess my mission has been to help millennials understand how can they learn about this stuff the easy way.
So go on, let me put you on the spot. One last question. Give me, if everyone could learn one thing to live with for tomorrow, what would be the one thing that desperately want to give out to everyone to just pick up and start using?
Well, I mean, this is maybe a bit controversial at the moment because we're in a cost of living crisis, and I'm told all the time that none of us have any money to save. But actually, I think saving is seen as an act of sacrifice, and it's not. It's self-care. It's something that we actually do for our future selves. It's incredibly powerful, and it gives us three things. It gives us safety. So if we put our money in the bank rather than stuff it under the mattress, we know it's safe. And that's because it's covered under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. The second thing we should get out of it is a reward. And we haven't been getting a reward for saving money and doing the right thing until recently. And yes, savings rates aren't keeping up with inflation, but nonetheless, we are finally getting a proper interest rate for saving money. So that's the second thing. But the most important thing is the third factor, which is choice. You know, saving money gives you choice. And if you spend money today, there's a lovely quote from Jane Austen, which is, once money is parted with, it can never return. I.e., once you spend money, that's it, it's gone. And of course, if it went on something you loved and enjoyed and found really useful, then great. But if it didn't, essentially that money just went down the drain. But with saving, that money is still yours. You're just putting it on one side for future you. You're putting it on one side for when something really bad comes along and you need to be able to get that money in a hurry, or for when something really great comes along in your life and you just want to have some extra cash to be able to enjoy it. So I guess one of my missions is to try and encourage people to see saving as something that is actually incredibly empowering rather than as an act of sacrifice.
And on that point, persuading us all that we need some extra cash to have some fun, which I think everyone's in favour of. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks very much, Nick.